The season of Halloween is upon us, and keeping up with tradition, I wanted to highlight some of the scariest, spookiest, most unsettling quests in an Elder Scrolls title. For this season of fright, I wanted to focus on Skyrim. These are 3 quests that I feel as though exhibit elements of horror and thrill. Missions that might send a shiver down your spine, make the hair on the back of your neck stand up, or maybe, just maybe, might make you go, huh, neat.
Wow.
These will be in no particular order, but with each quest, I'll give a brief summary in the spookiest way I can, then at the end, I'll discuss what makes them scary and or thrilling to the audience. Plus, before I reach number 3, I'll throw in 3 honorable mentions. Quests that have some elements of horror to them, but for reasons that I'll discuss later, I couldn't quite add them to the list. Honestly, who knows? Maybe you'll find the extra scarier than the outlined 3. If you're like me and jump at the suspense of loud noises and sudden movements, boy are some of these stories for you. If not, well, rest assured there are plenty of spooks, scares, and frights for everyone. Speaking of which, that leads me into a quick disclaimer. Skyrim is obviously not a horror game. Because of that, these elements of horror are subjective. You might not feel any fright towards something that myself and others would find scary, and vice versa. That being said, I'm sure a lot of you would agree with most of the picks for this list, and if not, I'd love to hear any additions or substitutions that you'd make to it. Alright, starting things off, the first entry for Skyrim's scariest quests is the House of Horrors. Who would have thought that a quest with horror in the name would have made it on today's list? The House of Horrors follows the Dragonborn into the city of Markarth. There, they come across a priest who's a vigilant of Stendarr. Tyrannus is hounding the locals about one of the Hold's abandoned houses. According to the Vigilant, his order has reason to believe that it was used for Daedra worship. This can involve things like human sacrifice, ritualistic offerings, and sadistic acts. While no one in town can offer any answers regarding the home, Tyrannus takes it upon himself to go inside and check things out. The player follows the priest, and what they discover is truly horrific. At first, the pair hears strange noises coming from the next room over. Tyrannus, believing it to be a lone Daedric worshipper, charges through the home. The player follows closely, and soon, the duo reaches a locked door. While they haven't found anything yet, the tables quickly turn. Tyrannus, knowing more about the occult than the Dragonborn, realizes what's going on here. Through fear and fright, he yells at the player to get out of the house as soon as possible. The Dragonborn, still in the dark, does what they're told and backtracks through the home. All the meanwhile, the odds and ends in the home start floating and getting violently tossed around the room. This isn't any ghost, and it's certainly not a Daedra worshipper. The pair, wading their way through flying objects in a rumbling manner, manage to make it back to the entrance. However, that's when the real terror starts. Both men begin to hear a voice in their head. This voice is twisted and clearly not of this world. It's saying that only one of them can leave the house alive, and that they must act first before they're attacked and killed by the other. This sends vigilant Tyrannus into a frenzy, and the mighty priest is the first one to snap. The Dragonborn and the vigilant begin to hack each other to bits, until finally, the last one standing is the player. While the house begins to settle, the Dragonborn isn't done here. The door leading back out into Markarth is still locked. The entity starts back up and speaks to the player again. It beckons you to descend further into the home. By doing so, it promises to reward you greatly. Heading back down and pushing past the previously locked door, the pathway leads into the bowels of the earth. Every so often, the entity talks to the Dragonborn and encourages them to just go a little bit further. Eventually, you stumble on this ancient, hidden demonic shrine. The prize that was promised is this equally strange and horrific mace. Getting close to it, the trap springs and the entity begins to laugh. This being is Molag Bal, the Daedric Prince of Domination. As he speaks to the Dragonborn, all the player can really do is sit and listen. Through the conversation, you learn that Bal seeks revenge, or as he puts it, submission. This horrific altar was once used for human sacrifice. However, one of Boethiah's worshippers, Logrolf the Willful, periodically desecrates it. This way, no one can resume with Bal's atrocities. In exchange for your life and the reward, the player must find Logrolf, lure him to the house, and spring the trap on him. Rescuing the priest from one of Skyrim's dungeons, it's relatively easy to convince him to come back to Markarth with you. Once inside the home, like a mouse to some cheese, he approaches the shrine. In an instant, the trap springs, and Logrolf fears for his life. However, in a moment of courage, Boethiah's faithful stands up to the Daedric Lord. He claims to have been in this spot before and won. Unfortunately for Logrolf, the Lord of Domination has already thought out the sick details for the rest of the plan. Using the rusty old mace, the Dragonborn is the one to beat the priest into submission. Wail after wail, crack after crack, the priest's bloody body begins to break. He ends up dying, but Ball isn't ready to end his suffering. The prince resurrects the worshipper, and the beatings continue. Finally, out of desperation, Logrolf submits to Molag Bal and rejects Boethia. Bal claims Logrolf's soul and orders the Dragonborn to kill the priest on the spot. Logrolf begs for his life and pleads for mercy. Unfortunately, it's too late. With his death, his soul gets sent to Cold Harbor, where Molag Bal can torture and haunt him for the rest of eternity. The House of Horrors is one of the more, shall we say, horrific Daedric quests. There's no happy ending here, for anyone really. Vigilant Tyrannus' mind breaks and he dies to the player. Logrolf the Willful receives 2 lifetimes worth of beatings, dies twice, and is essentially forced/tricked into selling his soul to Molag Bal. From there, Bal fast-tracks the whole process and has Logrolf killed on the spot. The only one who, quote, wins here is the player. You get a handy new mace, but at what cost? You kill 2 seemingly innocent men. You beat one of them to death twice, and in a way, you practically pledged yourself to the Prince of Domination. Molag Bal is by no means a good or even neutral deity. He's the epitome of evil, and at the root of every favor, there's some sickening twist or despicable action. For me, there are 3 elements of horror and thrill here. Number 1 is seeing 2 strong men break down. Seeing how quickly Molag Bal is able to instill fear in them, as well as make them go against their own morals, is truly terrifying. Number 2 is the Dragonborn's willingness in all of this. There's no good option or path for redemption. The player is forced to be complicit in all of these wicked and unjust deeds. You don't have a choice with the Vigilant, as it's do or die, but with Logrolf, the Dragonborn doesn't even blink. They beat the priest bloody and watch on as he's damned to Cold Harbor for the rest of eternity. Then of course, there's Molag Bal himself. Bal has developed a reputation with being one of the evilest and vilest of the Daedric princes. Like I said before, anything that has to do with the Prince of Domination likely involves corruption, deception, and murder. Moving on, the second entry for Skyrim's spookiest quests is Blood on the Ice. This quest involves a deadly serial killer with a horrific motive. Blood on the Ice begins with the Dragonborn in the city of Windhelm. Upon your first visit, you'll likely hear the locals talking about a string of gruesome killings. By heading to the graveyard, you'll get to witness one of them firsthand. Several NPCs are gathered around a recently mutilated woman. A guard approaches you and tells you to stand back. Getting the story out of him, he tells you that the victim is a young woman named Susanna. Susanna is the 3rd mark of Windhelm's serial killer, the Butcher. The Butcher always strikes at night, it's always women, and they're always torn up. Unfortunately for Windhelm's citizens, the Stormcloaks don't have the manpower to investigate the murders. The war is spreading them too thin. This is where the Dragonborn offers to lend a hand in the case. The guard has you interrogate the 3 bystanders. Calixto Corium says that he saw a man run away from the scene, but he didn't get a good look at him. Silda the Unseen says that she heard Susanna scream, but as soon as she arrived, Susanna was already dead. Then finally, Helgerd says that Susanna's possessions, minus her clothes, are still intact. More specifically, her coin purse wasn't taken, meaning that money wasn't the motive. Reporting back to the guard, unfortunately, none of this information seems all that useful to him. From here, the player insists on helping out more with the investigation. Insulted at the insinuation, the guard directs the player to Yorleaf. If he lets you on the job, then the guard is willing to share more information. Yorleaf is Ulfric's steward, and chatting with him, he's more than happy to have an extra set of hands for this case. Returning to the crime scene, the body's been removed and the bystanders are all gone. All that's left behind are several pools of blood, but trust me, it's a lot. Speaking with the Windhelm guard, he gives you 2 leads. One of them is to question Helgerd again, one of the 3 bystanders from before. She works in the Hall of the Dead and is essentially the city's mortician. Helgerd can likely determine the cause of death, and she can see if there are any more abnormalities with Susanna's body. The other lead is to follow the trail of blood. It actually leads pretty far away from the graveyard and out into a separate part of town. Choosing the former first, the Dragonborn speaks to Helgerd in the Hall of the Dead. When asked about anything strange on Susanna's body, Helgerd mentions that the cuts were made with ancient Nordic embalming tools. Essentially, The cuts were deliberate, and the butcher removed body parts from Susanna. While this is certainly disturbing, it doesn't help to draw any conclusions, and Helgerd is adamant that she's not the guilty party. So, switching courses and following the second lead, aka the blood trail, it ends up bringing the player to Hiram Manor. As of this moment, Hiram is locked up tight and secured by a master lock. Needing to gain entry, the Dragonborn returns to Yorleaf and inquires about the house. Apparently, Hiram was Frigga Shattershield's old home. Frigga was one of the butcher's first victims, and ever since her death, the Shattershield clan closed up the place and left it abandoned. Yorleaf says that Tova Shattershield is the only one with a key to Hiram. Seeking out the matron and speaking with her, she's obviously still heartbroken over her daughter's murder. While Tova can barely talk about it, the Dragonborn is able to get her cooperation through the hope of catching the butcher. Tova hands the key to Hiram over to the player, but warns you that the house has been stripped clean. Essentially, there shouldn't be anything left in there. Well, as it would turn out, Tova is sorely mistaken. Upon entering the manor, the player is able to quickly spot some unsettling items. For starters, the trail of blood continues and leads to the southern wall of the home. It then abruptly stops at an out-of-place chest. Interacting with the container, you notice that the chest was only recently pushed up against the wall. On the inside, there are 11 Beware the Butcher flyers and a journal belonging to the serial killer. Looking around the rest of the home, there are other oddities that may or may not be linked to the killer. For starters, there are bottles of mead laying around, which indicate that somebody's been in here since Frigga's death. There are also various furniture pieces like tables, wardrobes, a bed, and some chairs. One of the tables holds more articles regarding the butcher. All the article says is to beware the killer and to report to Viola Giordano if you have any information. Underneath the stack of papers, though, is a strange amulet. Who it belongs to and what it represents is currently unknown. As for the other furniture pieces, whether they were abandoned by the Shattershields or added in by the new house guest is also unknown. Running out of clues, the Dragonborn decides to crack open the butcher's journal and read its contents. The killer reveals that there is a motive behind the murders. The butcher is collecting body parts, bones, marrow, muscles, ligaments, flesh, limbs, blood, you name it. They then discuss how they stalked Susanna through Windhelm and almost had their plans foiled a couple of times due to onlookers. The butcher targeted her in particular due to her, quote, strong-looking joints. It's also revealed that the killer spent some time in Winterhold. They remark at how the college wastes their time with petty magic and research. Meanwhile, what the butcher's doing is of grand importance and could be an incredible breakthrough for the dark arts. As a last-ditch effort, the Dragonborn looks around the manor one last time. Checking the wardrobes again, the one on the northern wall seems to have a false back panel attached to it. Removing the board, it reveals a truly horrific scene. Skeletal remains, both old and new, are littered all over the room. There are bottles of meat on the floor, indicating that the butcher is Hiram's new and only resident. It appears as though the killer was searching for the rest of the body parts and or bones. The stone altar at the back has some sort of symbol on it, and the Dragonborn is able to deduce that it's meant for a ritual of some kind. Accompanying the bones on the altar is the butcher's second journal. Picking it up, the player gives it a read. The killer details the amount of body parts that they've collected. For one of the entries, the butcher says that the parts should preferably come from a Nord, which is quite peculiar. After that, there's some kind of passage regarding the ritual itself. Reading it before knowing the plot may seem sort of confusing, but reading it after, it honestly makes a lot of sense. At this point, the Dragonborn has taken a few samples of evidence to work off of. While the player may not know much more about these writings or the necklace, some folks in town might. Heading back to Yorleaf, the Dragonborn asks the steward about the nickname, the Butcher. Yorleaf says that Viola Giordano is the one who coined it. As for her flyers, someone keeps tearing them down and taking them. Due to what we saw in Hiram, the audience now knows that that someone is the Butcher. As for the strange amulet, Yorleaf suggests that the Dragonborn pays a visit to Calixto at the House of Curiosities. He may know more about it. Finding Viola first, the player asks about the Butcher. While she doesn't have any strong leads, the Dragonborn brings up the killer's journals and the lair in Hiram. From there, the two of you come up with an accusation. Fingers get pointed at the court mage, Wounfirth. Viola confirms that rumors have been circulating regarding Wounfirth and some questionable activities. With this information, the Dragonborn returns to Yorleaf and tells him of their findings. Through the evidence of necromancy and the strange amulet that's steeped in magic, the steward is ready to make an arrest. He rounds up the town guard and heads upstairs. The court mage gets approached and cornered. Yorleif recites his crimes, and Wunferth appears to be utterly confused. The mage calls Yorleif insane and says that he's also been investigating the murders. The conversation gets cut off though, and from there, the guards begin to haul him away. Looking around the wizard's quarters, there are certainly some oddities like a fresh skull and possible Nordic embalming tools. There aren't any more journals though, nor is there anything else beyond that. Regardless, with the serial killer behind bars, the city of Windhelm can rest easy again. Or so they thought. After 3 in-game days have passed, the Dragonborn returns to Windhelm. Upon going through the city gates, the player stumbles across a shocking sight. Another woman has been brutally murdered. This time, it's outside the Candleheart Hall. The victim is an Altmer named Aravanya. She's the wife of the stable master, Ulendil. The town guard is equally as confused as the Dragonborn. Everyone thought that the killings were done and that the butcher was caught. Disturbingly, that's not the case. As per the guard's suggestion, the Dragonborn heads to the dungeons and seeks out Wunferth. Chatting with him, the court mage gets snarky at his false imprisonment. While it is on the player's head, the Dragonborn convinces him to help out with the cause. After presenting all of the evidence to Wunferth, he's able to draw some conclusions of his own. This is the work of a necromancer, or at least someone who's using necromancy. The killings aren't random either. They're done at specific times and for specific purposes. Wunferth believes that the next murder is actually going to take place that night. He suggests that the player patrols the streets and keeps an eye out. As of this moment, Windhelm is calm and quiet. The braziers are lit for fire and warmth, and most of the citizens are asleep. After wandering by the Candleheart Hall and the graveyard, the Dragonborn makes their way to the market. Arriving just on time, but still too late, they see a man approach a lone woman. The woman is Elda, and the man plunges a dagger in her back. Chasing him down, the man ends up being Calixto Corium, the owner of the Museum of Curiosities. Corium was one of the original 3 bystanders at Susanna's murder, and he's the one who tells you that the amulet belongs to Wunferth. Catching the butcher, there's no fair trial. The Dragonborn kills him in the streets and puts an end to his terror. With the official serial killer dead, Yorleif rewards the player with special treatment from the guards. Wunferth is released from prison, and the streets of Windhelm are safe again. To wrap up this story, if you were curious what Corium was up to, there's one final journal in his museum that tells all. In one of Calixto's chests, there's all the evidence you need. A dagger, embalming tools, linen wraps, and the last journal. In it, the butcher talks about losing someone named Lucilla. Unable to live without her, he learns of a dark ritual with even darker requirements. Essentially, using necromancy, Corium was going to Frankenstein his lover back to life. Different body parts from different women, all sewn up together. While it's not stated, it's assumed that from there, the altar in Hierim would be used, possibly along with some kind of soul gem. Fortunately for the citizens of Windhelm, the butcher never made it that far. However, he did make it farther than he ever should have, and who knows if the death toll is only at 4. For obvious reasons, this quest has plenty of horror and thriller elements. For starters, there's a serial killer on the loose, an unknown assailant who's targeting women, brutally murdering them, and cutting off select body parts. It loosely mimics the story of Jack the Ripper, an old English serial killer who targeted women, killed them, and then removed organs, limbs, and flesh. Another element of horror is Blood on the Ice's reference to Frankenstein's monster. Corius is collecting various body parts from different victims, in hopes of turning them into one live being. The twist is that it's his former lover, and it involves dark magic instead of science. Then the last element, while mild, is the overall investigation portion of this quest. It's certainly not scary, but looking into a murder, collecting clues, entering the abandoned house of Hierim, and questioning witnesses is a fun thriller that gets the player's mind active. Before getting into the third and final main entry for this video, I just wanted to go over the honorable mentions. These are quests that I've already covered on this channel, and honestly, they deserve their own spots on this list. However, due to timing, Halloween being right around the corner, and the fact that I've already gone over them in detail before, they'll just get a brief summary and an explanation on why they're spooky. Number 1 is Laid to Rest. Laid to Rest takes place in Morthal, and the player is conducting a small investigation. One of the locals' houses burnt down, and his family died in the fire. However, instead of grieving them, he immediately moved on with another woman, Alva. After searching the rubble, the player discovers the ghost of Hrogar's daughter, Helgi. After some back and forth, Helgi disappears and the player goes to look for her around town. Important to note is that other strange occurrences have been going on around Morthal, like the disappearance of Leylette, Thonir's wife. Well, just outside of town, the Dragonborn finds Helgi, but she's not alone. Leylette is there too, and she's not human anymore. She's been turned into a vampire. After word gets out, the discovered common links between Leylette and Helgi is Alva, the woman with whom Hrogar now loves. Breaking into her home and descending to the basement, you learn that Alva is also a vampire. In her coffin, she has a journal. The journal details their grand plan. Just outside Morthal is a nest of vampires. They're led by an ancient vampire named Movarth. The goal is to turn everyone in town into blood slaves, livestock that the undead can feed on for decades to come. From here, the Dragonborn raids the cave and defeats all of the vampires. Obviously, a vampiric plot to overthrow an entire hold and use them as cattle is not only gnarly, but pretty horrific for the NPCs who live there. If it weren't for the Dragonborn's intervention, more and more citizens would have been turned into vampires, and eventually, their plan probably would have worked. They would have dominated the town and would have enslaved everyone. Number 2 for honorable mentions is the Taste of Death. This one involves the Daedric prince, Namira. The Dragonborn is sent to investigate Markarth's Hall of the Dead. Something snuck in there and has been feasting on the corpses. After some investigation, you learn that it's a person. Her name is Iola, and she confesses to being a cannibal. Instead of killing her, the player can hear her out. She tells you to meet her at a place called Reachcliff Cave. There, all will be revealed. Once inside, the player and Iola fight their way to the Shrine of Namira, some horrific-looking torture device that's clearly used on people. In order to activate the shrine, it needs a sacrifice, someone who can be killed and eaten by the cult of Namira. Iola chooses Brother Verilus, the initial quest giver for this mission. Once he's been convinced, he follows the Dragonborn to Reachcliff and gets brought to the shrine. Upon the player's return, you see that the rest of the cult has gathered, and they've been busy. There are signs of struggles all over the chamber. Fresh splatters of blood, bloody limbs, and recently snapped bones. Once Brother Verilus has been hypnotized into laying down on the shrine, the player kills him and begins to feast on his corpse. The rest of the cult follows suit. Namira selects the player as her chosen one, and that ends the Taste of Death. I probably don't need to explain how this quest can be disturbing and unsettling to most. It not only involves a cult of cannibals, but the player can partake in their atrocities. They deceive an innocent man, kill him, and slice up his corpse for others to eat. Then, the third and final quest I'll draw attention to is the Whispering Door. Honestly, what this quest was meant to be is what's most disturbing about it. The player hears from Jarl Balgruuf that lately, his youngest son has become more violent and cold. It happened out of the blue, and he isn't sure why. After speaking with Nelkir, you learn that he's been communicating with something in the castle's dungeons. A lady has been speaking to him. She's been revealing certain truths about Nelkir, but it's done in a way that makes him feel angry and isolated. Investigating for yourself, the Dragonborn learns that some manifestation of Mafala has been brought inside the castle. After speaking with her, Mafala says that she'll only release the child if the player can gain access to the room. Talking with Nelkir again, he says that there are 2 keys. One is with Farengar, the court wizard, while the other is with the Jarl himself. Securing one copy and entering the room, the player sees a sword and a book. Picking up the ebony blade, the Dragonborn receives praise from Mafala. Both her and the book detail the horrors that the sword actually presents. It can't be broken down, nor can it be cast away. It feeds off of the user's desires and corruption. What's more, the blade becomes more powerful when it kills, but it's not just any kill. It's the deaths of those who were trusted by the wielder that the blade feeds off of and powers up with. Now, the original version of the quest was much darker. Nelkir and the other 2 kids would slowly turn corrupt and evil. They would begin their reign of terror by killing one of the horses at the stables, and then they'd move on to their own father. The Jarl's kids would have murdered him, and it would have all been due to Mafala's influence and the ebony blade. That's most certainly a darker tale, and one that's riddled with unsettling and scary elements. If you want to learn more about these 3 quests, I highly encourage you to check out my videos on them as I go into greater detail there. For now, they remain as honorable mentions for Skyrim's spookiest quests. Alright, the third and final mission for Skyrim's spookiest quests is technically a 2-parter, The Man Who Cried Wolf and the Wolf Queen. It starts with the Dragonborn at the Blue Palace in Solitude. Ascending to the second level, the player will have walked in on a court meeting. Several high-ranking members of Solitude are standing around and listening to someone named Varnius Junius. Junius is a resident of Dragonbridge, and whatever he's saying to the court, he sounds spooked. According to their conversation, Junius claims that there's strange and unholy magic coming from a cave near Dragonbridge. Jarl Elisif says that she'll send extra soldiers to patrol the village, but at the rest of the court's advisory, no action is taken against the cave itself. Varnius leaves, and the Dragonborn speaks to Falk Firebeard. Falk calls the cave out as being Wolfskull Cave. He admits that there are strange occurrences coming from there and that there are even disappearances from the village. However, he believes it to be nothing more than wild animals, or at worst, a handful of bandits. Regardless, since he's busy with his duties and the war has the Legion spread thin, he asks the Dragonborn to look into it. After a brief ride over, the player lands at Wolfskull Cave and makes some horrific observations. The cave is guarded by the undead. Two skeletons lunge out from behind the rocks and charge at the Dragonborn. After taking them out, the player realizes that the threat is much more than just wolves and bandits. It's something much eviler and much darker. Entering the cave, the player wades their way through the tight tunnels and natural corridors. Eventually, the real enemies start to make themselves known. The Draugr have arisen from their slumber, and the root cause of that comes from the resident necromancers. The necromancers have gathered in large numbers, and the reason for that is revealed in the next zone, Wolfskull Ruins. The Dragonborn delves further into the cave and rounds the corner to see a truly shocking sight. Various forms of energy and magic are being drawn from different sources throughout the cavern. They're all flowing towards the center. Pictured at the top of the buried keep is some unknown entity. This entity is sapping up all of the energy, almost as if it's feeding off of it. Perhaps even more unsettling than this conjuration is the ritual that's taking place. A group of necromancers are congregated around the entity known as Patema, and are reciting chants and incantations. Whatever's going on here, it appears to be almost finished. In order to make it to the altar, the player fights their way through a horde of Draugr and a contingent of necromancers. Throughout the crawl, the Dragonborn hears more chanting. What's more, the entity, Patema, is now speaking back to the necromancers. After a little bit, it's made clear that the necromancers are not only trying to summon Patema, but they're also trying to bind her to them. Eventually, the player makes it to the top of the keep in Wolfskull Ruins and takes on the group. After the ritual master is defeated, something peculiar happens. Patema disappears. At the moment, it's believed that the Dragonborn has put an end to the ritual, and because of that, the entity was sent back to the void. With the job seemingly taken care of, the player returns to Falk Firebeard in Solitude and relays the news. Falk is absolutely terrified at the mention of Patema. He's grateful that she's been sent back to darkness and rewards the player with 600 gold. To think, if Falk continued to ignore Varnius' pleas for help, more and more villagers would have went missing, and the full power of Patema would have been released on Skyrim. Well, at least Dragonbridge and Solitude can rest easy now, right? Well, not quite. After the player has left the city and leveled up at least one time, a courier makes haste and delivers a special letter. It's from Falk, and he urges the Dragonborn to return to Solitude at once. The matter is sensitive as it regards Wolfskull Cave and the Necromancer's binding ritual. Heading to the Blue Palace and speaking with the steward, he shares grave news. While the ritual was halted, Patema actually managed to escape. Her dark minions have already been discovered within the city. Falk recommends that the player speaks with Stur, a priest of Arche. He's fairly knowledgeable on the matter, and he's the one who discovered Patema's presence in Solitude. Heading to the Hall of the Dead, the Dragonborn finds the priest and inquires about Patema. It's here that Stur reveals who Patema really is, or was. She's the former queen of Solitude, one of the most dangerous necromancers in history, and she's the mother of Uriel Septim II. While her spirit has been brought back to the realm of the living, she hasn't been fully resurrected. For the time being, she's retreated to the old catacombs beneath the city. There, she has undead servants who are at her beck and call. In order to stop Patema from reaching full strength, the Dragonborn needs to retrieve her remains and have them sanctified by Arche. As a last word of warning, Styr mentions that not only is Patema dangerous and powerful, she's also exceptionally cunning. Leaving the Hall of the Dead and entering the Temple of the Divines, the player descends to the lower level and unlocks the gate leading to Patema's catacombs. Rounding the corner and peering down the hall, the Dragonborn makes way for the dark, eerie passage at the back of the room. Entering the catacombs, The scene appears to be similar to the Blue Palace, same type of architecture and build. As the player continues onwards, they begin to hear the voice of Potema. She says that once the Dragonborn dies, she'll raise them from the dead and use them as a soldier in her army. From here, the catacombs begin to warp and change. The halls get darker, the player delves deeper into the earth, there are more and more unsettling sights, and the number of undead servants continues to grow. Instead of necromancers, there are now vampires lurking in the catacombs' depths. Together with the Draugr, their aim is to stop the player from reaching Potema's chambers. As the Dragonborn carries on with their journey, the halls become fouler and danker. Crypts that have been lost for centuries are being reawakened, and with them comes the horde of undead. The next zone down is Potema's refuge. The refuge closely resembles Nordic burial grounds. While the undead aren't as abundant here, there is a point in the journey where the player gets cornered by a vampire and a Draugr scourge. The vampire makes it clear that Potema is building an army of the dead. Their goal is to overpower the living and to conquer all of Tamriel. Just past that room is the door leading to the final zone, Potema's Sanctum. Here, the hallways are packed with more Draugr and vampires. They're clearly guarding something, and whatever it is, it must be close by. Continuing down the corridor, the next room over holds an unsettling scene. The floor is littered with corpses. Some are ancient Nords, others are fresh kills, and a select few are vampires. Potema is still beckoning the player over, telling them to serve her and that she's getting closer. In fact, the spirit of Potema is in the next room over. The entity is hovering above the chamber, and using some of her absorbed energy, she begins to attack the player. However, it's not just her that's in here. Potema is able to awaken the surrounding Draugr, unleashing waves of leveled undead upon the player. For the most part, all the Dragonborn can do is defend themselves and kill off the Draugr. The fight is long and it's grueling. However, once those threats are defeated, Potema escapes the chamber and bursts into the next room over. There, she's able to assume a different form. She's still a spirit, but now she resembles a skeleton. Potema is guarding her remains. She knows that if she loses, she'll be sent back to the abyss forever. However, if she wins, she can finally be resurrected and her undead army can take over the world. In the end though, the Dragonborn is ultimately victorious, and once they've defeated Potema's spirit, they can get a hold of her remains. Exiting the catacombs, the Dragonborn brings the bones to Styr, who sanctifies them, ensuring that Potema can never be brought back. The player then heads over to Falk Firebeard. The steward thanks the Dragonborn a second time for their efforts, promises to never ignore the warnings of the citizens again, and rewards the player with another payout. Now, the City of Solitude can finally rest easy. They know that Potema can never be brought back to this world. However, the same can't be said for other dark figures of history. Plus, the catacombs underneath the city are still rampant with undead. Who knows who or what might try to move in there. The Man Who Cried Wolf and the Wolf Queen are obviously a little different from the previous two major quests. One of them was about a haunted house, and the other was about a serial killer. While those have major and obvious elements of horror to them, I feel as though the Wolf Saga had more subtle nods to thrills and scares. Everyone disregards the warnings of Wolf Skull Cave until it's too late. The player ventures in, expecting small resistance, only to find a whole cult of necromancers resurrecting one of their own. What's more, the necromancer is Potema, one of the most feared dark wizards in history and an important political figure of Tamriel. Hearing the ritual, seeing the energy, and understanding the impact creates an overall unsettling environment. Then, for the Wolf Queen quest, the catacombs themselves are rather unnerving. Knowing that this is right below the streets of Solitude, seeing all of the undead gathered there, and witnessing the catacombs change shape are all somewhat creepy elements. Potema wanting to claim the Dragonborn's soul, and the final fight are both cherries on top, so to speak. Plus, like I was saying earlier, this could open the door for other necromancers to bring back certain beings, like Mana Marco. Who knows what nefarious deeds Wolf Skull Cave could be used for, and who could take up residence in the catacombs. And with that conclusion, thus wraps up Skyrim's 3 spookiest quests. Of course, the video really encompasses more than just 3. You have all of the honorable mentions, which honestly deserve their own spot on the list. If I hadn't covered them in detail already, they definitely would have been up there. Please let me know down below which other spooky quests deserve the spotlight, and until next time, keep on adventuring.